Hello and welcome to a Haskell Invitational edition of Handicapping with Stats Race Lens. I'm Dan Tordjman from America's Best Racing. Joining me once again is TVG's Christina Blacker and the reigning NHC champion, Scott Coles. Both Christina and Scott, as you likely know, are users of Stats Race Lens, and we're going to look at how they might be utilizing Race Lens on Saturday. Before we dive into what's on tap, I want to give a shout out to Equibase's Ellis Starr, the Uber capper. He'll be managing the controls as we hop around Stats Race Lens today. Ellis also had Sir Winston in the Belmont Stakes, so be sure to check in with Ellis on Twitter. Keep an eye on his picks this weekend. Also, right now, be sure to take advantage of a special Stats Race Lens promotion, a quarterly rate of just $99 for new subscribers. That's $200 off the regular price. All you have to do is use promo code SRLQ99S. The offer ends July 31st. Again, the code is SRL for Stats Race Lens, Q for quarterly, 99 for $99, and S. That offer ends July 31st. All right, Christina, let's start with you. How have you been, and what are you most looking forward to on Saturday at Monmouth?
Looking forward to the entire program. You know, TVG sponsors the Haskell, so it's a race that we have been counting down to for weeks and months, it feels like. And, of course, just with all of the ups and downs and kind of the roller coaster that we went on this year through the Triple Crown, seeing Maximum Security back in action again. He was handed defeat in the prep race. So I'm curious to see what he can do this weekend and if he does sort of get back to his winning ways, or if it's going to be Bob Baffert's day once again. We've seen it time and time again, 8-time Haskell winning trainer Bob Baffert. So I am here in Del Mar, but very focused and very excited for the Haskell this weekend.
Absolutely. A lot to look forward to. Second half of the season underway, and to see how things unfold. Of course, the memory of the Derby not too distant. So to see how Maximum Security comes back and how the Haskell unfolds, it'll be interesting, and we're going to dive into that in just a little bit. Let's welcome in Scott Coles now. Scott, a futures trader. I know you're someone who loves digging into data. You've got multiple screens up at any one time when you're handicapping. I saw you at the NHC. On a day like the Haskell, what's your general approach to both handicapping and forming tickets?
Honestly, stats has made that a lot easier because you can process so much information so quickly, and that was kind of what I used at the NHC as well. I play a lot of internet tournaments, so I will see once they're drawn, and usually a lot of times you'll see either tonight or tomorrow what races are going to be mandatory in the mythical type tournaments, or there's always tournaments around that you can travel to that are live bankroll, which are different approaches for me. But I always try to fit, and I try to always get better at fitting into and playing the contests that with the races included that I have the strongest opinions on, or at least getting the most of them. So if there's a bunch that I like at Monmouth, or if Haskell's where the action is and where all the focus is, I'll try to find an internet contest that involves mostly Monmouth races, or as many of the big ones as I can. As well as cash betting, I will look for the horses that I know I can single, and I like to pick the pools where I can play really aggressively and play many different combinations in races I think can fall apart, but single the horse that I know and then really kind of hammer those combinations. And I'm always trying to get better at that, but sometimes it's a pick 3 and you have to sit out the pick 5 or sit out the pick 6, or sometimes it is the pick 6. But picking pool selection and betting efficiency is something that I have struggled with in the past, and I think it can be an Achilles heel on a big day because everybody wants action, everybody's done the work, and it's very hard to sit out a race. But I'm always trying to get better at that and just picking the pools I want to go after, or picking the tournaments that have the right races for me. So stats allows you to cover so much so quickly. I kind of lean on angles, and kind of before the race day comes, pick my spots the best I can.
Some interesting insights there. And as I think whether you're playing tournaments this weekend, whether you're playing the races straight up, you got an assortment of races where the fields are generally smaller at Monmouth, and they're going to be this weekend, but super competitive. 5 graded stakes, 6 stakes in total, and we may as well dive right in, Ellis. Let's take a look at race 5, the first stakes race of the day. It's going to be the Oceanport Stakes. At first glance, this looks like a race that goes through Divisadero. I know Scott is a is a Divisadero lifer. Has always been a fan, and had also sent me a note earlier saying that could sometimes come back to bite you. But on class alone, he stands out. He's earned $1.5 million. He's back at his preferred distance here of 1 mile and a 16th. But I'm going to take a small play against him with a horse named Just Howard. He's drawn widest of all the 6. He finished behind the Divisadero a few times over the years, but he looks like he's rounded back into form in his last couple of tries, posting a 108 and 107 Equibase speed figure in his last 2. In fact, if you go 4 races back and 5 races back, you can see those numbers go up with each and every race. Just Howard is running about as well as he ever has in his career. So you see the increasing Equibase speed figures in the last 4. He was beaten by less than a length by Catholic Boy in the Dixie, in spite of a tough trip in that one. And a cool thing about Stats Racelands, whenever you see that red up angle right there, that means a horse had trip trouble in a previous race. And as you're exploring Stats Racelands, you could also very easily pull up the races and watch them to kind of see how significant that trip trouble might have been. But when you've gone through that sort of trip trouble and you still finish just a length behind Catholic Boy, very good sign for Just Howard as he kind of moves into a little bit of a softer spot here with Divisadero looking like the main threat. So not sure how much value we'll get on Just Howard. He may go off as the second choice here, but certainly if you're looking to beat Divisadero, Just Howard might be a horse to take a look at. Let's move over now to race 8. This is one of the spots we heard Scott talking about races you may want to either sit out, or if you're looking for an absolute single that you could build a pick 3 or a larger horizontal wager around. This could be the race, because Midnight Bisou looks like an absolutely impossible horse to beat in this spot. She'll be a handful in here, coming off a dazzling win in the Ogden Phipps. This is considered, and I think people looking at this race probably think this will be a paid work for her ahead of a scheduled start in the personal ensign next month. Scott, what are your thoughts here? Is there any way around Midnight Bisou?
No, I mean, this is a perfect spot to look at the pools, anything that connects to this that you have other strong opinions. And for me, I mean, Midnight Bisou is a stone cold single. And even if you do like races around, you can play heavy in the pick 3, and I believe the Jersey Short pick 6 starts in this race. Single, don't get it, come back in other pools if you have other opinions. But I mean, for me, it's just such a standout on class. I'm also a Mike Smith lifer. I just love the rides that he's given, proven to win, no matter if the pace is fast, slow. I mean, that'd be the only concern, is I'm just really walking on the front end without much pace in this race. But I think Midnight Bisou can handle any situation. Just is such a standout and such a cool horse that I look forward to betting her on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up a good point about looking at the pools and looking at the races around this one. I think what I would also do is kind of take a look at the exacta, potential exacta probables, and what you're going to get if you did a Midnight Bisou Coach Rocks exacta, or you did one with Breaking Bread, who's another one who's interesting here, and see if you could find something that represents value to you and kind of hammer an exacta. That's another way to go as well. Christina, Midnight Bisou for you as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it just looks like a paid workout. And I was almost, as I was sort of handicapping and when we saw them draw the races, almost surprised to even see her show up, just because she's been, grade one, all of the top races in the country over the last couple of months. The grade 3 just looks like she must be doing so well that they think they can go ahead and send her around there one more time before heading back to New York. Obviously, they have big designs on the Breeders' Cup in the fall, and it's just a matter of getting her there, and this does look like a paid workout. I think, honestly, the only concern could be the heat that we're expecting this weekend at Monmouth, and, horses that aren't based there and haven't been there, coming into that environment for any of the shippers is, to me, the only red flag that I think you can throw up with regard to some of these short-priced horses.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. It's something you'll have to track throughout the day. I saw that the forecast had the temperature being maybe a couple of degrees cooler at Monmouth on Saturday, but still with the heat index expected to be in the hundreds, low hundreds, something to keep an eye on. So definitely look out for that. Let's move along now. I know we've been kind of throwing a lot of chalk your way these first couple of races, but I think we'll hopefully start finding some prices in some of these later races. Race 9, the Wolf Hill Stakes, they'll be going 5.5 on the turf. There are probably a couple of ways we could go here. Christina, I know there's a horse here that you like a lot.
There is a horse here that I like, and I just love the turf sprint at Monmouth. I find that when I'm handicapping, whether you're going to Saratoga or whether you're going to Laurel or horses are shipping to California, the turf sprint racing at Monmouth really does hold up. One of the things that I wanted to look at for this race was the true odds page. I think we can start there because anytime that I'm dealing with a turf sprint, I really want to know a lot about the pace and especially the late pace. You can see just via the running style there that we have some speed right down along the inside. The inside 3 horses are going to hook up, and if you sort it by late pace here, you'll see who does finish these races the quickest, and that happens to be the 7, Justaholic. He's a son of Justin Phillips. There isn't a whole lot of data as far as his offspring at turf sprinting. He himself never tried to grasp, but this colt, it really does look like they found what he wants to do in that last race. If we go back to his past performances, the trainer, Thomas Clark, was someone that I was not familiar with. So I did a little digging with regard to him. So Tom Clark has always been a high percentage conditioner, but he's kind of taken some breaks here and there from the game. He grew up in Arizona. He spent a lot of time in Idaho. He was a friend of Gary Stevens when they were very young. He's a little bit older than Gary, but in similar age, and has kind of taken some personal breaks with his family, raised his kids for a while, and then came back to the game. So you can see there's about a 3-year gap since he's had a starter. From the end of 2016, he comes back and runs this horse on June the 8th, and bam, right back to the winner's circle, took over the training from Keith Nations, and it looks like he's, as I said, just really pointed this horse in the right direction. He's been about an 18% trainer throughout his career, and for me, when you have a conditioner that clearly knows what he's doing, he might fly under the radar because there have been light numbers on him as of late. And a horse that finishes this turf sprint faster than his competition, that's a horse that I love in here. And I think he'll get a little pace to run at. He's, going to break from the outside post. He has the ability to stalk. And I'm looking at Justaholic as a horse that I will be including on all wagers in the Wolf Hill this weekend.
Yeah, that was interesting how you kind of took a look back at Thomas Clark's history there. I got to admit that's a trainer that I didn't recognize myself at first glance, and so that history helps. And whatever they've done with this horse, clearly off of that year break that you see there, has made a difference. Long break between races. And the cutback, obviously, from 2 turns to the 5 furlongs seemed to help there. So that's a horse that's interesting. And I also like a horse in here named Tricks to Do a little bit. I can forgive that effort last out. Not great. It's McCarthy up for Delacour. They always do well together. And Fig Jelly is another horse here, who I believe is number 4 in the mix. There's Tricks to Do, we just talked about. Fig Jelly is going to take a lot of action. Of course, I think we were looking at the pace projector. We saw him there right at the, in the thick of things. And again, Saez and Service here with a little bit of a preview, the Maximum Security team, a few races before the Haskell. So let's go ahead and skip ahead to the race before the Haskell, which is race 11. That's going to be the Matchmaker Stakes, a very competitive looking edition of the Matchmaker. Although on class, there are a couple of horses that certainly stand out. Valedictorian for New Jersey-based Kelly Breen. He always wants to win a big one on Haskell Day. And then you've got competition of ideas for Chad Brown, a horse who's been living in the shadows a little bit of another one named Homerique. Christina, I know this is where you were looking when you were handicapping this race.
It is, and I think it's worth pulling up the replay of her last race, just because if you're going to watch a lot of replays with regard to this particular race, she, to me, visually has the best turn of foot of any of the fillies or mares in this field. And as you say, just we can kind of, skip ahead as to where they turn for home. She's going to end up with a very wide trip on this occasion. And in Chad Brown's barn, you're in the shadow of a lot of horses if you are especially a filly or mare on the turf course. And so I think her hard luck has really just been running into her stablemates. She's already a Grade 1 winner herself. She clearly has the ability to win this race and many other greatest stakes races, as we kind of continue on through her career. But as of the last race in the New York, going the 1.25 miles, she gave up a lot of ground. She's coming from last. That's going to be, I think, what you will expect to see from her this weekend. But Homerique, her stablemate, is going to be able to cut a corner here. And you can see Castellano, he just wants to keep this filly in the clear, swings her out to the outside. She'll be 6 wide as they come for home. And she's only really going to be denied a neck on the wire here, whereas the winner is going to dart right through between horses there, cut a corner, the gray with the green silk. So when you consider the ground loss that she gave up to, a tougher horse, Homerique would be odds on in this field as well. I think this is a huge effort from her last time out. She's shown that she is continuing to improve at 4. If you're a handicapper, you have to love those 4-year-olds that come back, take that next step forward, and I think we're seeing that with her. She's definitely the horse to beat, but I thought that the mare to her outside was interesting as well, and that's the 7, Zenobia. She runs for the second time here stateside for trainer Jonathan Thomas, and I pulled an angle on him. He's one of those conditioners that has been given a lot of nice horses because he's proven himself. Of course, the trainer of Catholic Boy, former assistant to Todd Fletcher. And when you get him in this circumstance, this mare was over in Europe. She was off for nearly a year, came back in that race on June the 23rd. So coming up this weekend, she runs second off the layoff. And this is where Jonathan Thomas tends to strike, 28%, 5 for 18, second off the layoff over the last 5 years in routes. And I think we don't have to go through her whole last race, but if you do have the time, once we kind of wrap up here, to take a look, she stumbled. She made kind of a mid-race move. She really tried. She got in tight behind horses, and she re-rallied. She showed enough in that race to let you know that she still has the will to win. She still has the ability. And it looked to me like a real building block, and she takes a big step forward on Saturday. I don't know if she's good enough to beat Competition of Ideas, if she ever will be good enough, but I do think she's going to be a better mare on Saturday than she was back on June 23rd.
Yeah, love those angles. Also loved, what you could see there on the ground loss in that replay we showed a moment ago with Competition of Ideas, even though it evokes some difficult sort of memories for me as it burned me in that pick 5 sequence. It was still, it was a worthwhile watch, and kind of knowing how solid Competition of Ideas was that day, and how solid she is here, and how tough she is. She might be to beat here. If I'm going to take a shot with a little bit of an outsider, I will go take a closer look at number 4, Tordjman from Brazil. Hasn't been seen in close to, I think, 10 months now for Graham Motion, makes her first U.S. start for Motion. And I did a little bit of a search here for Motion, just looking at the past 5 years off of a break of over 6 months on the turf, in route races, foreign shippers for Graham Motion. I mean, you probably could have assumed the numbers were good, but did you know they were this good? 29% win percentage, in the money over half the time, positive ROI, median win price solid too at $12.10. Motion on days like this as well. I mentioned earlier Kelly Breen. When you watch Mid-Atlantic Northeast racing on a regular basis, you realize these are the kinds of trainers who pop up on days like this and usually, pick up a win or two. And so Tordjman's one who's interesting to me, making the first start in the U.S. here. No idea what you're going to get. Keep an eye on the board. I don't want too short of a price on her, but if I look up and if I see her at 4-1 or 5-1, I may take a little bit of a shot. As Christina mentioned earlier, Competition of Ideas will be really tough. And also the Kelly Breen horse who mentioned valedictorian is no pushover here. So a couple of ways to go, and certainly a couple of ways to go in the Haskell, which is the feature of the day. Big question as we turn to the Haskell is, can Maximum Security return to the dominant form that we saw from him when he romped in the Florida Derby back in March and then crossed the wire first in the Kentucky Derby? Gonna assume that he wasn't fully tuned up for the Pegasus, which was the prep for this race, when he went off at odds of a nickel on the dollar and lost to King for a Day. What did that race take out of those two horses? What kind of tactics might we see from them today? Lots of questions to dig into. Scott, I know you've got a couple of opinions, and I think you might be playing against one or two of the favorites here.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And I think Christina will touch more on it with an interesting point about Maximum Security's work pattern, so I don't want to really go too much into that. But it certainly looked like they took the race a little bit lightly, and they weren't expecting that big of an effort or any chance that Maximum Security could lose that race. And And at some point, if we do want to show the replay, stumbled horribly out of the gate. So the people that are seeing that, the lunge, the stumble at the start, still made the lead, but I mean, that always takes extra energy. It kind of startles the horse. It's just, we'll see it here coming up, but it'll be the two you're going to need to watch are the 2 and the 3. But almost goes all the way down to the ground, still kind of rushes up, takes the lead. And that's tough. That's tough on a horse, especially a horse that's not fully cranked, in my opinion. I don't know how he could have been. I think I actually got a chance to talk to you in the Derby, and my concern in the Derby, which I ended up being right by default playing against, which was just really lucky because the horse ran huge, was that hadn't really had to do too much, had a lot its own way. I mean, I was also against in the Florida Derby because I thought Hidden Scroll would at least, they wouldn't completely strangle the horse back. And so horses that have never had to fully prove it are kind of dangerous. And the horse went out and did prove it in the Kentucky Derby. Whether the slop helped the horse, I mean, I definitely didn't hurt, but I love that Maximum Security is drawn outside and the battle testing. I think the horse is going to be taking this race much more seriously, and being drawn outside, you're going to have some options for Saez to kind of see how it develops. King for a Day ran huge in the last race, but the draw being flipped, King for a Day got the press outside. I mean, now Maximum Security kind of gets to see it develop. King for a Day is going to have a really interesting decision to make. Velasquez prefers to be outside of horses. That's just seems to always be his riding style. And being stuck on the rail, I mean, they're going to have to get out of there. And there's so much speed in this race. If you look at the pace projector, I mean, it's about as hot of a pace as you can imagine. I mean, even Spun to Run is adding blinkers, and the horse has already been near the front quite a bit. I mean, I don't know how many horses want the lead in this race, but it seems like almost all of them at one time or another outside of Everfast, which could be the undoing of Maximum Security. But I mean, early in Maximum Security's career, he was able to sit, but you'll see here he's projected to be in front. It's whether how hard he has to work to do that, or if that's exactly where he wants to be. I'm hoping he kind of sits off a little bit and lets horses like Jovia and Spun to Run or anybody else that's going to try to maybe set a little bit more of a suicidal pace go. But then you can also look at Mucho Gusto, and I think as Christina mentioned earlier, I mean, Bob Baffert has won this race 8 times. Is just incredible at getting horses ready for it. And Mucho Gusto, if you look at sorry to send you back, but if you go back to the pace and then sort by late pace on the chart next to the pace projector, you'll see that, I mean, Mucho Gusto does have the best late pace ability. So that horse kind of showed a different element last time, sitting 4th early, kind of creeping up to 3rd, outside in the affirmed, and was able to finish. So I mean, if the pace is crazy hot, you'll have horses like Mucho Gusto with a lot left when other horses might not. And if Everfast is the other interesting one, that horse sits completely back, like he did in the Preakness. I mean, I think you can see that horse getting a piece as well. I like King for a Day. I thought King for a Day ran a big race last out, and I thought Jovia did as well. But I just think being drawn inside with so much speed, the decisions they're going to have to make and how fast you'd have to go early to be able to get a clear lead is going to be tough. And I also think Jovia, another interesting point on that horse was that I think the rail was 100% where you wanted it to be on Belmont Day. Jovia got the rail the whole time. It was carried a long way. And that's where even where Sir Winston spent a lot of the time that day as well and was able to sneak out and ran a huge race. But I think there was a big reason why Jovia lasted as long as he did. So, I mean, long story long here, I'm going to lean on Maximum Security and Mucho Gusto the most. I just think the draw helps them a ton. I think those are the horses you want, but it's going to be very interesting to see how this race is run. Somebody's going to make a decision, and how hot this pace can be is going to be fun to watch.
So Scott, on Team Maximum Security finally, and maybe taking.
Oh man, it pains me. It pains me.
It's like it's a relationship, right? It evolves. Sometimes it starts out well and it deteriorates. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it's going to be much and it turns into true love. And it seems like that's where you are right now. with maximum security. But it does sound like you are going to take a little bit of a stand against one of the other horses expected to take some action here. Of course, King for a Day, who beat maximum security last out. Christina, we've talked about pace a little bit. I think Scott touched on it, a ton of pace. He even mentioned Spun to Run, who adds blinkers here. He also gets an accelerated version of blinkers, which is that Paco Lopez is riding too. So he'll be going even faster than you might expect. Christina,
Yes.
what do you think? How do you see it unfolding?
I think you're absolutely right there. There's no brakes being pumped there on Spun to Run or any of the horses to the inside, really. And I think Scott made a lot of the great points. You know, Johnny Velasquez, probably that whole team would never have wanted to draw the rail with King for a Day. I think that there is a concern that he bounces this weekend because he took such a big step forward in that last race when he really took it to maximum security. Going to maximum security, though, and kind of pointing out the work pattern. You know, Jason Service has always been one of those kind of quirky conditioners as far as works go. He's never been one to work horses very fast. He does a lot of kind of 2-minute long open gallops, real stamina-inducing type of training. But I was just taking a look at his pattern in between the Kentucky Derby and the Pegasus. He had one work on May the 22nd, and then he had a little blowout the day before the race. So I think, to Scott's point, I think they really were very confident and felt like they could go out there and just kind of go for a paid workout for maximum security, and didn't expect King for a Day to really run the race of his life that day. King for a Day really took it to maximum security around the turn, and I think late stretch, you saw Luis Saez just realize, look, I need to take care of this horse. You know, this is all he has right now. We have bigger goals throughout the summer, and clearly this is really one of them. You factor that in with the stumbling at the gate and kind of leaning on the gate and everything. And he also had a temperature earlier that week, as reported by Jason Service. There were just a lot of things working against maximum security. I do think he improves this weekend, but I'm actually going to pick Mucho Gusto as well. Scott pointed out the pace projection. I think one thing that you've always wanted to have in the Haskell is speed. And you've always wanted to be able to finish off your races, and that's exactly what Mucho Gusto has. He has the early speed. He's light on his feet. He's naturally just very quick. So one of the things about Bob Baffert's horses, as hard as he trains, as much as he's looking for fitness, and as much as he's looking for speed, very rarely do you see his horses as runoff types, as horses that absolutely need the lead or they don't perform. They do relax. And he did so last time in the Affirmed. He came away naturally very quickly. Joe Talamo ended up angling him to the outside, letting him relax. And then he went ahead and won by 2 1/4 lengths. And Joe Talamo learned a lesson the hard way on Mucho Gusto, and it was back in the Sunland Derby. He was stuck at the rail. He came out quickly. He thought he could go, and again, as a heavy favorite, just run circles around that field. But he took a lot of pressure, and that was his undoing. He ended up third that day, and it kind of took him off the Derby trail at that point. It was a real turning point for this horse and this team. I think since then, Joe has ridden him a little bit differently, and I don't think he wants any part of an early speed duel. I think this horse is going to relax, and you're going to see Talamo just try to get outside, sit back off of whoever does want to take the lead and make his move as they turn for home. Really, the only concern for me, and I touched on it with Midnight Bisou, is the heat. You know, Mucho Gusto is coming out of California. We've had a very light spring into summer. It's, 70 degrees at Del Mar right now. This is going to be a very different environment for him. So if he can withstand the conditions, he's the horse for me on Saturday.
And I'm with you, Christina and Scott. I know you both like Mucho Gusto quite a bit. Make it 3 of us. I think Mucho Gusto figures to sit the best trip, and I think he's also got the most upside here. I will say, just in terms of a little bit of an outsider who I believe Scott touched on briefly, and just by way of anecdote, America's Best Racing spent some time with Dale Romans at the Belmont and looking at Everfast, and he told us there, look, this horse might not win today, but he's the kind of horse who has matured in his training, and since his runner-up finish in the Preakness, finally seems to understand what he's out there to do. Now, the Haskell hasn't always been friendly to deep closers, but we talked about this pace and how hot it might be. And I think Everfast, you have to consider at the very least sort of in your exotics. And at 10 to 1 in the morning line, if things go just right for him, it would not surprise me in the least if this was Everfast's breakthrough day on Saturday. So Everfast is one that I'm looking at at a price. But like both of you, I think Mucho Gusto, as well as Maximum Security, of course, have to be taken very seriously. So with that, we have completed the Monmouth Park stakes action. We do have a bonus play for you, a bonus play courtesy of Scott Coles. Scott, Saratoga, Saturday, the Coaching Club American Oaks is the feature. It runs earlier in the day. I believe it's race 3. And you've got a horse that, we don't like to say the word lock, right? We don't want to totally lock ourselves into that. But who's the horse, and why are you so confident in her?
Well, as you can see on the screen right now, it's Guarana, and I'm just very excited about this horse's future. I just think it's a horse that if you just tell the story, right? I mean, horses will make you nervous. That won on debut on the front end in the slop. But it was such a huge performance that I used quite a bit in the Belmont Day, but I had to use others. Now the horse wins by 6 in the Acorn, breaks the Acorn record. Was not really, spent a little bit of time near the rail, which is where you want to be, but was not nearly as much time as like Serengeti Empress that day. Has every pace advantage if you look on the Equibase ratings, early, middle, late, number 1, just absolute standout in this field, stretches out in distance, has only run 2 races. I mean, everybody else has had the chance to improve. There's no pace in this race. Going to be forced to go from the rail. I mean, the thing that makes me nervous about heavy favorites sometimes is when they are drawn outside, that sometimes they'll be cute and let somebody else go. I think you're going to see the horse sent because of the draw, and it's just absolutely looked incredible. I mean, this replay you're seeing right now and the way that it breaks away from a very good field. I mean, CC wasn't where you wanted to be, and I think I listened back to your guys' last time, and I was also using CC as much as I used Guarana that day, not on the good part of the track. So I think that'll be an interesting one moving forward as well. But Guarana just ran so huge, and the third start of the career is still another improvement angle. Going to continue to stretch out. It's Chad Brown, it's Jose Ortiz. I mean, it's just a type of race smack dab in the middle of the pick 5 at Saratoga that always have a chance to pay big. You can turn it into a pick 4. I'm not giving you anything clever here, obviously, because the horse I believe is going to be 1 to 100. But I'm just very excited about that horse's future and all the advantages they have, all the different tests you've already seen pass, going up in distance, proving you can do it on both types of, a fast track, a sloppy track, and showed a different dimension where it didn't need the lead. So, I mean, they're just, the future is so bright for this horse that it's just very exciting. And I did want to talk about how you can possibly use that to make some money in the pick 5 on Saratoga on Saturday while you're not looking at Monmouth.
Yep. And should have been a pretty clear sign when we saw Jose Ortiz hop off of the Kentucky Oaks winner, Serengeti Empress, to ride a horse who just had, a maiden victory under her belt. But Guarana was so impressive that day, as you mentioned, closing into, a horse who was on the lead going fast in Serengeti Empress that day, but everything on the lead was winning, or at the very least, kind of finishing, within a length or two, and to pull away by 6 lengths in that spot was just so impressive. So I'm with you on Guarana. Again, an opportunity to turn your pick 4 into a pick 5, a free square potentially. That's pretty much it for Saratoga. Great card throughout though. So if you get a chance, take a look at that. And you could take a look at any number of cards utilizing Stats Race Lens, especially with the reduced quarterly rate price of just $99 for new subscribers. That's a limited promotion, ends July 31st. If you're listening to this, you've enjoyed looking at some of the features. We haven't even scratched the surface on the number of things you can do when utilizing Stats Race Lens, customize searches, save angles. There's so much to dig into. And again, that quarterly rate, $99 for new subscribers. The promo code is SRLQ99S. I want to thank again Scott Coles, Christina Blacker, and Ellis Starr for running the show here. Thank you to everybody at Equibase and Stats Race Lens. Best of luck to everyone listening. Enjoy Haskell Day, TVG Haskell Day 2019.